This first little bit should have probably gone with the last slide, but I don't feel like recording it again. So between 509 and 287 BC, we'll see that Rome expands to control much of the Mediterranean world, especially control the Italian peninsula. And as it does so, the Senate grants tribes or families or areas of the city the right to elect tribunes, right? Members of the assembly who can represent the plebeians in disputes with patricians. There's also a few legal developments that are important at this point. If you've been skimming through the online textbook, you probably saw an allusion to the publication of the Law of the 12 Tables, so-called because it's written on wooden tablets, in 450, which codifies for the first time people's rights and their obligations. And while consuls always traditionally came from the senatorial class, actually by the middle of the 4th century, by 367 BC, they actually break with tradition, and plebeians, members from the assembly, can also be elected consul. And from that point forward, at least one consul has to be plebeian. So we see a greater share in the power among the different groups within Rome. Okay, so that's the bit that I was supposed to include on the last slide. Let's think about Roman expansion now. In the first, say, 3 centuries of the Roman Republic, Romans pretty much divided their time between farming and conquering. And they grow from a pretty insignificant small city to pretty much a world-class empire in what I might consider 3 stages. The first of those, let's call it stage A, they subjugate other people in the Italian peninsula, we can call them Italic people, and bring all of the peninsula of Italy under their control. We'll flesh that out a little bit. After that, they fight a major Mediterranean power called Carthage in a series of wars called the Punic Wars. And after that, which is going to expand beyond the scope of this lecture, they end up conquering all of the other Hellenistic successor states that we talked about a while back, send armies into what they might consider the barbarian West, and really grow into an empire. So that conquest of Italy, step A, right? They do this through a combination of diplomacy and force. After they get rid of the Etruscans, what we talked about last class, they begin drawing the nearest Latin neighbors into types of coalitions. They say, hey, come join us. We'll grant you citizenship. You can become part of this great new thing that we're calling Rome. And when those offers fail, they use their army, which is now a legion evolved out of the old Greek phalanx, and all the great things that they learned from the Greeks and the Etruscans to conquer neighboring peoples. The way they treat these people kind of varies. Some of them are given full citizenship. And just like with the Sabine women, now people who aren't Latin are Roman as well. Some are given kind of what we might consider more municipal status. They can do their own thing as long as they pay their taxes and they don't rebel against Rome. And by 264, so we're talking about 250-ish years, not quite, they control everything south of the River Po, all the way to the boot of Italy. And in many ways, this is the end of a conquest of the Italian peninsula, but it's also the beginning of a larger, more ambitious project. Because in conquering the Po River Valley, which is flat and fertile and obviously has lots of water, they can increase their grain production, they can feed lots of people. Rome is doing pretty well. This slide's going to be a little bit longer, so bear with me. From 264 to 146, Rome gets in 3 different wars, and they get in wars with an African kingdom named Carthage. And if you see this in the terms, they don't call Carthage Carthage, they call them Phonai, because they were a Phoenician colony, much like there had been many Greek colonies in the Mediterranean. So the Phoenicians had founded Carthage around 800 BC, it grows in power, and by 264, it is one of the major ancient European powers. It is on par with the Seleucids, the Macedonians, the Ptolemies, the Romans. And because of access to trade routes and because of a sphere of influence that is very similar, you can look at the map here to where the 2 of them are, to Italy, Rome and Carthage get locked into a power struggle over the Mediterranean. And leaders in the Senate say, hey, if we can defeat Carthage, we can control this entire area. This is the big antagonist that we need to get rid of. So let's detail these three wars real quick. In Sicily, there are a bunch of Greek colonies at this point, now very much independent. And if you look at where Sicily is in the map, it's smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean. If you're talking about a spot where trading ships are going to pull in to get water and resupply, and a place that is of great strategic importance, it's Sicily. And Carthage, at this point, 264, is flexing its muscles a little bit. And it basically alludes to these Greeks in Sicily that, hey, join us, or we're going to come in and we're going to conquer you. Well, these Greek Sicilians, figuring that kind of the standard philosophy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, look north, and they look to Rome and they say, hey, Carthage wants to come in, they want to conquer us. Can y'all help us remain free? If you do so, we're going to enter into a nice agreement with you. And so those members of the Senate that see Carthage as an impediment to growing Greek power jump on board. Here's the thing. Rome hasn't really had to fight on the water at this point. And so Rome has superior land forces. Carthage has a pretty great navy. And so this is the point that Rome develops as a naval power, develops a navy out of necessity. Because infantry is their strength, their navy is really a means to transport that infantry. The ships they develop aren't really like the Greek triremes we saw. They do have one very defining feature. They create a huge gangplank that has a spike on the end. So basically what they try and do is get close to other ships, hurl that down so it attaches to the neighboring boat. They send soldiers on board. They destroy everything on that ship. They sink it if they can. If not, they take it as a captive. And in 257, they win a really important naval victory, which allows them to land an army near Carthage. The Carthaginians stop them, and war keeps going for 16 more years, but it's largely in North Africa, and it's largely to Rome's advantage. So eventually Carthage sues for peace. They give up control of their interests in Sicily and the islands between Sicily and Italy, and they also agree to pay reparations for that war. Well, think of yourself as a Carthaginian, and especially a Carthaginian like a generation down the road. You're going to be licking your wounds. You're going to think these Romans aren't all that great. They got us in the first round. Let's go again. So a second war develops between 215 and 201 BC. In the period before this, some Carthaginian mercenaries in Sardinia, another island, had rebelled. Rome takes the island. They demand more reparations from Carthage. Carthage, trying to recoup their losses and in control of much of North Africa, end up sending troops into Spain. And this might be where the name that's probably most familiar to you in today's lecture pops up. This is where Hannibal comes in. General Hamilcar Barca had been a leader in the First Punic War. His son Hannibal becomes a major general for the Carthaginians. And Hannibal goes into Spain and then eventually crosses the Alps. You probably know the story, with tons of his elephants. And he hangs out for quite a long time, basically engaging in a type of guerrilla warfare. He's got 50,000 troops, 60 war elephants. They cross the Alps in the middle of the winter. And they hang out in that Po River Valley in northern Italy for a decade. They rally a bunch of enemies of Rome, largely Gallic troops, to his side, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20,000 of them. And for 10 years, knowing that they don't have a huge army, they just kind of antagonize the Romans. Guerrilla warfare. Hannibal's not strong enough to attack Rome directly. And at one point, Rome captures Hannibal's brother. I love and hate this story. They execute him, they chop his head off, and they catapult his head into the Carthaginian army's camp. There are a couple major battles here. The first is the Battle of Cannae. Hannibal's army devastates Rome. They kill apparently 40,000 individuals. They gain support from southern Italian cities, who, much like the Greeks in the Persian sphere of influence, had really resented the fact that Rome had conquered them. And kind of taking advantage of what, say, Alexander the Great does in Egypt, says, hey, we don't really want to control you guys. We just want to free you from the Romans and let you do your own thing. Will you help us fight them? So this goes on for quite a while, and it's in this context that a really important Roman consul comes to power. He's a general named Scipio Africanus. He leads an army. He gives lots of impassioned speeches talking about how Carthage needs to be destroyed, and he realizes that their approach here is wrong. What they should be doing instead of fighting the Carthaginian forces in Italy is, hey, their army's gone, let's go to Carthage. So he sends a bunch of troops on ships. They land in Carthage. Outside of Carthage, they engage in a battle of Zama, Z-A-M-A, in 2002. They force Carthage's surrender the following year. And after this point, Rome is now in control of Spain, the Western Mediterranean, and Carthage is kind of reduced to the status of a very minor state. There's one very small third war. It lasts from 149 to 146 BC. It's kind of a small blip. But it's essentially that even though Carthage has lived up to the terms of their treaty, they're still out there as a potential antagonist. And there's lots of Roman xenophobia, hatred of outsiders. And it's in this context that Cato, who we're going to talk about a little bit more, comes to power. He gives lots of impassioned speeches. You can see from the source on Cato that what he finds really important in politics is how you can gain popularity, how you can present yourself. And in all of these speeches, he ends his comments with Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. So in 146, Romans go to Carthage. They burn the city to the ground. They sow salt in the earth so that crops can't grow. They kill and they enslave everybody. And by this point, now Carthage is gone. So sorry for 12 minutes worth of talking here. Take a break if you need. And we'll come back to an assessment of this, especially in terms of Polybius.